Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a ranked episode of This Year in Perfume. And again, if you've been following the channel, you know that I have been going back and ranking some of these lists. And we've been going by decades. So we actually started fragrances before the Roaring 20s. And then we actually did the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. The 60s all ranked in individual decades. Now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of my collection. And so this is actually going to be a decade that's going to be split in two. And so this is going to be 1970 to 1975. And I used to do this in some of the earlier videos that I did on This Year in Perfume. And I decided to bring it back. Let's talk about some of the things that actually happened in 1970 to 1975, because we say the words, but honestly, when you read some of these things, you realize just how long ago it really was. Major events in news history in 1970. The Beatles disbanded. Boeing 747 makes its first commercial trip. First! They're basically retiring the 747s. And there were a bunch of things, but the one that stuck out to me is the National Guard's fire and kill on 4 protesters at Kent State. I've seen those pictures. They're infamous pictures. You know, the protests at Kent State that, you know, the National Guardsmen actually ended up turning their rifles on the students and killing multiple students. What a nightmare. That was 1970. 1972, the Pentagon Papers were published. The voting age is released to 18. The first Walt Disney theme park is opened in Florida. That's 1971. It feels like it was forever ago, right? The NASDAQ debuts. The NASDAQ. It just goes on and on, right? There's so many cool little things that happen in each year. 1972, the terrorist murder 11 people at the Olympic Games. There's an infamous kind of picture, photo, you know, piece of history there. And American Pie is the #1 song by Don McLean. American Pie, 1972 was the #1 song. Unbelievable. And of course, Jack Nicklaus was owning the U.S. Open. And 1973, it says that was when the oil crisis, I think, was really going on. The OPEC countries agreed to kind of increase their production by 200%. Secretariat becomes the first horse to win the Triple Crown since the 1940s. Secretariat, they made movies about Secretariat. That was 1973. There was a lot of inflation going on in the 70s. I was reading about some of the inflation numbers back then, and it kind of is looking like some of the numbers we're seeing now. We haven't seen inflation numbers since then. 1974, the oil crisis really gets into full gear. And the one thing that stuck out to me in 1974 is, of course, the resignation of Richard Nixon following the Watergate scandal. And 1974, The Godfather Part 2 came out. That was 1974. What a great movie that was. 1975, the Vietnam War officially ends, and Margaret Thatcher is elected the first woman to Britain's Conservative Party, and then, of course, she'll go on to be Prime Minister. And just a little couple fun facts from each year. It's just, you know, I think officially in 1975, the Vietnam War ended as the communist forces kind of retook Saigon, and South Vietnam officially surrendered unconditionally. And listen to this little fact. Sony introduces Betamax, in 1975, and JVC introduces VHS. That was 1975, and Jaws was released in 1975. What a great movie. Just some facts from that era. So we're going to talk about my favorite 25 fragrances from 1970 until 1975. And these are going to be ranked. So these are going to be 25 all the way to #1, my favorite. Before we do that, though, a quick unboxing. And I say quick because I know there's only 3 things in here. So, or there should only be 3 things. unless Sticks threw in some extras. But this is from a friend of the channel, Sticks, who will join our lives from time to time. Let me just get this bad boy open. I guess I should have done this beforehand. Let's see. Apologies for the delay. All right, here we go. We'll just rip right into this box. All right, so the first one on the unboxing docket is Leather Oud from Floris. Now, I own 0 Floris fragrances. Now I own 1. This is the only Floris that I have in my collection, and this is a blind buy. This is a blind buy just based on, you know, the notes, the name. I love Dior's Leather Oud. I'm sure this is completely different, but British family perfumery since 1730. How about that? British family perfumery since 1730. Leather Oud takes inspiration from earlier days at Floris. The freshness of new leather complements and highlights the smoky aspects of oud. So obviously, you know, this is not going to be a oud from Russian Adam or Ensar or Bortnikov or anything like that. So I kind of know what I'm getting myself into. On one hand, on the other, I don't. So this is completely blind. Here, you can live right up front today, Floris. You can live right behind my head. And then we had another vintage, and the other vintage is a fragrance called this one. Actually, he may have this one is 100 ml, and it is called Biagiotti Uomo. Biagiotti Uomo. So, Biagiotti Uomo came out, I believe it also came out in the 1970s. Let's take a look. When did that come out? I am caught flat-footed on this one. Let's look it up together. Biagiotti. Biagiotti Uomo. 1989, excuse me. 1989. It's a spicy fougere. Bergamot, tarragon, coriander, rosemary, lavender, fern note, geranium, cedar, patchouli, leather, oak moss, musk, and amber. I think I'm going to like this just from my taste. It is a discontinued fragrance. This is right up Ram Duck Alley right here, deep in the heart of Ram Duck. Biagiotti Uomo. And there's a little bit of leather in the base. I think I'm going to like this. 1989. Why did I think this was the 70s? I'm way off. You can live up front today, too. All you newcomers can live in the front row. And then we have the final unboxing, and then we'll get on to the countdown. The final unboxing is a Trussardi, and it's actually another discontinued fragrance. So 2 out of the 3 fragrances from this little mini haul are discontinued, and this is a take on tomato leaf, and there's very few fragrances that do a tomato leaf note very well. Apparently this is one of them. The other one is a fragrance I absolutely adore for summer. It's called What About Adam by the House of Yop. But this one's called Trussardi L'Uomo. L'Uomo. That's how the Italians will do it sometimes. They'll put the L in front. L'Uomo. And Trussardi L'Uomo is also discontinued. And it is a release from 1995. And it's lavender, tomato leaf, mandarin orange, bergamot, cedar, floral notes, spicy notes, geranium, sandalwood, vanilla, patchouli, woods, amber, tobacco, and a note I've never heard of called Ocumal. I don't know what Ocumal is, but Parfumo says this is the only perfume that's ever used it before. There is a trademark R after it, so maybe it's a captive molecule. I have no clue what Ocumal is, but this is one for the heat, I believe. This is a summery, fresher take on a masculine, woody, fruity masculine with that tomato leaf. It's supposed to be a beautiful tomato leaf fragrance. So 2 discontinued fragrances and 1 niche, and we can say I am very happy with that little mini haul. More stuff to talk about on the channel. Okay, so let's get into this top 25. Now, I want to just remind everybody that when I rank these videos, these are my personal favorites to wear. Okay, so take that with a grain of salt. Whenever you see the rankings, you know, just remember that these are just my personal favorites to wear. I'm not saying one fragrance is better than another. Number 25, number 24, number 23, these are all good fragrances. If they weren't, I wouldn't have full bottles of them. It's just my personal taste, and some of it also is my familiarity with the scent. Some of the lower ones, you know, I haven't had a chance to wear as much, and maybe in a year or two, the ranking will change. But as of right now, this is going to be my top 25. So let's start with number 25. And this is tough because some people give me a little bit of heat for where I put the rankings, but whenever you actually try and rank things, you realize it's not as easy as you think. Something has to be number 25, just like something has to be number 1. And for me, number 25 is a discontinued fragrance from Coty, and it's called Musk for Men. And look how 1975 this bottle is. If this doesn't just scream 1975, I don't know what does. Look at the packaging. Look at the color scheme. Look at the atomizer. And you know what? This is basically a oriental take on musk. Okay, it came out, like I said, in 1974. And it's an animalic, musky, ambery, slightly woody, a touch of lemon kind of, you know, gets you off the runway with this, but it's all about that amber and musk. And for basically a fragrance I paid $6 for, it's now discontinued and prices may be going up. And there's different versions of this. The newer version, I think, doesn't have a sticker at all. It's actually imprinted onto the bottle. I don't know differences in versions or formulas or anything like that. All I know is that this is a very good musk fragrance. The problem is, now that I've gotten to know the real Siberian deer musk that, you know, Hermes Leather Oud uses, Russian Adam uses, or the musks that Bortnikov or Ensar use, it's tough to wear this now. Well, not tough to wear, but I'm always like, man, I should have worn Musk Habib or Siberian Musk or something like that. But I still think this is a very worthy fragrance to reference what was popular back then. Musks for men took off. It was like a revival in the 70s. People thought that literally musks could almost like put a spell on somebody else. Like if you're wearing a musk fragrance and you walk by that, you know, girl that you're in love with, that she could instantly fall in love with you, which is of course complete BS. But that was like what was going around in the college campuses at the time. Musk and patchouli. And those were like the 2 big notes back then. And this was apparently a really big seller. So yes, Coty's Musk from 1974 comes in at number 25. Number 24 is a Creed. And, you know, when you go before the 70s, sometimes some of the Creed claims get a little bit iffy, okay? Like you have to look cross-eyed at some of the years that the Creeds say they came out in. However, I think once we get into now the 1970s, I'm pretty sure these are legit dates. And this one came out in 1975. Of course, they don't release the perfumer. We don't know who the perfumer is. This is before Pierre Bourdon kind of came in and made the House of Creed what it is. And this is called Zeste Mandarine Pamplemousse. And Zeste Mandarine Pamplemousse, of course, is all about grapefruit in the opening. It's actually a really nice, citrusy, fresh, take. If you're a fan of citruses and white flowers, this could be an amazing fragrance for you because it's simple and you can see the dent. This is my dent. In the summer, I'll spray it like a demon. I will spray Zeste Mandarine Pamplemousse like an absolute beast in the summer. You can just spray away with this. It probably lasts 4 hours or so on your skin. And it has this, they say it's a white blossom note, but to me, it almost feels like a honeysuckle-like note. There is this white floral honeysuckle feel that's actually really elegantly done with that base of ambergris. You know, that's what the old creeds used to claim, that they just had an ambergris base, which whether it was real ambergris or whether it was creeds, you know, salty ambroxan that they passed off as ambergris, who knows? But it is really beautiful in the heat. The hotter the heat, the better this fragrance smells. It is discontinued though, is the only thing. Parfumos shows it's still available, but these old gray cap EDTs have been discontinued for years and years and years. And I actually think that they are some of the best value that you can buy for Creed. So for example, Royal English Leather is the one they claim came out in the 1700s. Like there was a king walking around smelling like Royal English Leather in the 1700s. But it was one of these gray caps. And so the gray caps were EDTs. Creed basically did away with all of the gray caps. The EDTs are no longer available. You can only buy the eau de parfum. Now Creed releases everything basically in eau de parfum. And so this is one of the holdouts from the old gray cap EDT days, which are actually some of my favorite Creeds. But this is probably my least favorite. Well, there's another gray cap that's going to make an appearance here later on in the countdown. But Zeste Mandarine Pamplemousse comes in at number 24. And that is from 1975. And I think it actually is from 1975. By the way, speaking of spraying like a demon, let me just show you my scent of the day today. I forgot to mention, it was Amouage Dia Man. And speaking of dents in bottles, you can see the dent that I put in this. I wore it to work today. Absolutely brilliant work scent. Fantastic. So posh. So absolute posh. I actually got a compliment today. Not that I care, but I did get a compliment on this today. It's cardamom, frankincense, labdanum, bitter orange, plum blossom, peony, ylang ylang, iris, vetiver, Brazilian rosewood, amber, leather, and patchouli. And it's just a beautiful concoction. It's a Bertrand Duchaufour creation. And you can see what's so interesting is if you've smelled some of Bertrand Duchaufour's other creations, like for example, if you have smelled this little bad boy right here, which is called Zonka by the house of L'Artisan Parfumeur, there is a definite, in my opinion, there is a definite connection between these two. Kind of the way that they use this crazy peony, you know, mixture. Peony is a very rare note to see because it's such a soft flower. Both of these are pretty soft fragrances, but the way that they kind of blend together is just, I think it's beautiful. It's more for people who really love perfume. It's not for somebody. Dia Man catches a little bit of grief from, you know, the masses because it doesn't have the projection, the beast mode, the sillage of Interlude or something like that. You know, it's not the Blue Beast. But it's a beautiful fragrance for what it does. It stays in its lane. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's very elegant, very posh, very chic. And if you wear fragrances for yourself, it really is like a little aura, just a perfect little bubble that just follows you around. It's never going to go past half an arm or whatever length, but it's fantastic. So Dia Man was my scent of the day. Okay, back to the list. So we did 24, which was Zeste Mandarine Pamplemousse. Number 23 is a fragrance from the house of Bourjois. Frenchmen's ears are probably bleeding everywhere. But Bourjois put out a fragrance from 1975 again. And this is called Masculine 2. Now, there is a Masculine 1. I've never smelled it. And this is kind of this spicy, citrusy. You can tell it's a cheaper fragrance just by the atomizer. You know, these kind of cheaper 70s atomizer. There's another one that looks very similar to this we're going to talk about, but much higher up on the list. It's kind of a citrusy, fresh, spicy fragrance, if you will. It has spices like nutmeg and cardamom. It's got some herbs, basil, Tuscany basil, they say. Tuscany basil. There's citruses, there's orange and bergamot and grapefruit, and there's a vetiver and Virginia cedar base. So it's an old school scent. It actually gets compared to a Floris, which I've never smelled, Original Gentleman's Cologne, which Floris claims came out in the late 1800s. I've never smelled that one. But Moudesir actually sent me this for free, I believe. And it's good. This is a good one. I'm glad to have it because it is discontinued. I don't think this is a vintage bottle or anything. You know, made in France, it says. It's etched. The batch code is kind of etched into the bottle, if you will. I don't think it's a vintage bottle, but it's a good fragrance. I'm glad to have it. And it's a cheapie. I think you can still find these on eBay for 10, 15 bucks or something. Not expensive at all. So, yes, Bourjois Masculin 2 comes in at number 23. Number 22, back to the House of Creed. And this one actually came out in 1970. And it's a hard to find rare Creed. When you do see a flacon of this pop up, I think the only way they sold it was flacons. It is extremely hard to find and expensive because I think it's discontinued. But Parfumo says it's still available for purchase, but I don't think that's true. Came out in 1970, and this is called Creed's Sélection Verte in this little decant that I have. Sélection Verte is kind of the citrusy, fresh fragrance that came out in 1970. Some people compare it to a 4711 style perfume. You know how 4711 did those kind of spin-offs of its original 4711 cologne. They did one called Lime and Nutmeg, and they have all these different versions of it. And that's kind of what some people compare it to. I've never smelled those. I don't really care for 4711 personally, but I do think that it shares some similarities to a very popular fragrance from back in the day, and that's Jacques Fat Green Water. And green water is famous because it uses the most neroli ever. The formula, the original green water, which this is a vintage bottle, actually uses the most neroli ever in a composition. And you can still smell the original apparently at the Osmotek. And this Creed reminds me of green water. Like they took their cues from green water. It's definitely that Creed DNA. It has some peppery, citrusy opening. There's also peppermint. And to my nose, it says herbs, but I get a distinct licorice-like smell when you first spray with the neroli. The neroli adds this level of clean freshness. Neroli, usually will give you this laundered, clean feeling. And of course, that what they claim is Creed ambergris in the base, which again, who knows what the base was. All I can say is just like Zesty Mandarine Pamplemousse, if you're in the mood for a fragrance to spray when it's like 100 degrees outside, Sélection Verte is not a bad one to go with. It's just so expensive, and it's not really my favorite taste. These kind of, citrusy, fresh fragrances, they don't move me very much, but it is pretty well done, I must admit. It's pretty well done. All right, so that was number 22. Now, number 21, I really struggled with where to put this. This one was almost at number 20, but it ended up falling back after some spraying and testing. Excuse me whilst I hydrate. And this fragrance is a Chypre fragrance from Balenciaga, and it's from 1973. And this is called Cialenga. Cialenga. Now, Cialenga is kind of one of those unicorn fragrances. It's discontinued. It's very hard to find. Jacques Janssen created Cialenga. And it's actually a really good take. If you're a fan of Chypres, if you like the Chypre style, if Mitsuko and Diaghilev and, those kind of fragrances really speak to you, and you're okay with floral Chypres, because there's a huge floral heart in this. You get a lot of jasmine and rose and iris and lily of the valley and ylang ylang. Check this one out. There is a fruitiness to it as well because there's this blackcurrant note. It's green, but you get this lovely, what's missing in vintage perfume, what is missing in modern perfume that you smell in vintage perfume when you smell it is that quality sandalwood, oak moss, dry down that you get in a proper chypre. You can smell the real oak moss in this. You can smell the quality sandalwood, not the cheaper sandalwood replacements that they use now, but it smells like you're smelling an amazing high quality, buttery, smooth, soft, almost spongy sandalwood with this very textured, deep, even though the fragrance is, kind of, it's not extremely heavy. It wears, it's very uplifting. It's a chypre through and through. And you'll really get a lot of the florals, but I would have no problem wearing this as a guy. I love chypre fragrances anyways. They're my favorite type of fragrance because they're just so complex and there's so many transitions, and Cialenga is actually a really great example of that. But I had to put it at 21 because I got to know this a little bit better while I was kind of creating this list, and I had to put this one spot ahead because this is a crazy fragrance no one talks about. It's completely under the radar. In fact, on Parfumo, I'm one of only 2 people who claim that they own a bottle. I think Amouage at Enchanté has bottles of this, and if you are a fan of kind of art, from the boxes, if you like the art that they would put on the front of the boxes of the bottles, you have to check out the box of this fragrance. This is called Bateau Ivre. Bateau Ivre from the house of Thomas Lawrence, Paris. Thomas Lawrence, Paris. Bateau Ivre. No one talks about this. This is a crazy, to me, it's almost like a animalic musk. Okay, so imagine like the precursor to something like, I'm not even going to say a name of a fragrance because there's nothing that really smells like this. But imagine you took something like Coty Musk and you infused it with some of the 80s animalics that were to come over the next 5 to 10 years. And you just made it into a 70s style masculine. That's kind of what it smells like to me. It smells like a musky, spicy, slightly animalic take on musk, but it's more interesting than Coty's musk to me. But I really like this. This is for you vintage hunters and for you folks out there that like to collect kind of weird, strange, off the wall, no one talks about fragrances and you don't want to spend a lot of money on. Check out Bateau Ivre from the house of Thomas Lawrence. There's no note listing, so I'm just kind of going off of my nose, but it's very musky to me. And then at number 19, we've got another beautiful floral chypre. Probably one of the best I've ever smelled. This is right up there with the original YSL from 1964, and this is Givenchy III. So Givenchy III came out in the year 1970. And it's a proper floral chypre created by Jean-Francois Lati and Raymond Chaillan. Raymond Chaillan is like perfume royalty, okay, from IFF. And this is a beautiful galbanum note. So the 70s were the era where you really started to get this green galbanum. And close to the top of the list is one of the greatest galbanum fragrances to ever be created. And the 70s was an era for that. And so imagine you take this floral chypre type idea, like I was mentioning with Cialenga earlier, and you crank it up a notch. You add animalics like castoreum, and you add this resinous myrrh, you add ambergris, and most importantly, you add galbanum and peach at the top. So the galbanum fits right at home in the 70s green era for women's, chypres. It's complex. The quality is unbelievable. The quality of this is out of this world. Like, you will spray this and it's instantly in your, favorite floral chypres of all time. It just can't be denied. Now, they reformulated this, and the new version I hear, of course, is not as good. I've never personally smelled it myself, but the new version, of course, has lost a step. So if you can find one of these older bottles, that's what I would say go for. And there's the classical Mousse de Chine base in here. Muguet, jasmine, oak moss. Yes, just a classic chypre, patchouli, but the castoreum in the base just makes it much more interesting to me. So that's why it's a couple notches higher than Cialenga. Very well done. Hard to find, can be expensive, but as a lover of chypres, Givenchy III deserves a spot on the list. Okay, next up we have number 18. And number 18 is a Hermes fragrance that's grown on me, but I still wonder, you know, what the modern is like. I want to get a modern bottle of this just to do a comparison, or maybe a partial of a modern or something like that. And this is called Equipage from Hermes from 1970. And the perfumer of Equipage is the great Guy Robert. Yura Rose and I were chatting about some of Guy Robert's work recently, and he called Guy Robert the creation of the impossible perfume, that he can take a blend and, you know, and add all these ingredients that shouldn't work, and it works beautifully. And here, when you first spray this, to me, I love vintage perfume, and I've often thought that the vintage bottle of Equipage that I have opens up even challenging for me. Like, I get reminded of we go to, sometimes there's this over 55 community that, you know, that is around our area, that you can go have kind of breakfast there. And they have a beautiful golf course and all this stuff, but you kind of see the old guys walking in with the athletic socks pulled up to their knees, and they're wearing, you know, shorts and going to golf, and it just gives me this image of an older gentleman. And there's nothing wrong with that, because I love vintage fragrances, but it just never recovers from that tough opening to me. It does course correct slightly. It gets better, but it never just really retakes the initiative. The opening is tough. It's aldehydic. It's there's a note of mace, which apparently mace is kind of the silk, you know, twinning around the actual nutmeg itself. So it's a little bit of a different smell than nutmeg, but it's from the same plant as the nutmeg. And there's clary sage, there's rosewood, there's cinnamon, there's carnation, there's pine needle, there's jasmine, there's lily of the valley, oak moss, musk, tonka bean, vetiver, patchouli, and vanilla. And it does have this outdoorsy feel. If you've ever smelled Equipage, you know that there's this feeling of being with nature. You know, I kind of say the same thing about Guerlain's Vetiver, but Guerlain's Vetiver really grew on me, even though at one time I would say I didn't really care for either. Guerlain's Vetiver really grew on me as kind of the years went on and my nose matured, if you will. This one just never has yet, and I'm curious. People have said that this bottle is just tough to wear. These older bottles, which is what Equipage was supposed to be like, is just a little harder to wear than the modern. And I would love to see what Jean-Claude Elena did with the modern. If I ever find a partial bottle or something, I'm going to snatch it up if I can find a good price on a modern bottle. And one spot ahead of Equipage at number 17 is another Hermes. This one I actually like wearing even more than Equipage. You may be surprised, but it's a woman's targeted fragrance from 1974. And it's, again, a floral chypre that leans very green. And it's Amazon. I really like Amazon. I think this is extremely underrated. Bergamot, hyacinth, geranium, cassia. The cassia adds this almost like slightly pissy Uranus quality, which some people who really aren't into perfume may look at this and say, why in the world would you want to have a pissy note at the top? But it adds this, you know, opening, in the sense that if you've ever listened to, you know, Edmund Runitska speak, he had a saying that said that the best perfume should shock you. When you first spray, you should be kind of shocked. And the cassia adds this almost like dry, green, Uranus, pissy-like quality that kind of gives you this, you're taken aback a little bit. But this dries down beautifully, gorgeous. Jasmine, iris. The iris here is very pronounced. Lovely iris. I heard it described recently by a perfumer for one of the fragrances I was doing an early impression on. Said that iris reminds him of kind of sniffing the top of a baby's head, is what he said, like a newborn baby's head. You know how their head is supposed to release, you know, give the mothers like, it's supposed to calm the mothers when they smell the top of their baby's head. Because when they're breastfeeding, the baby's head is right underneath their nose, right? And he said that's how iris smells. And I've never thought of it in those terms, but I know exactly what he means, because it can sometimes be very powdery and you know, sometimes it can be cold, sometimes it can be cosmetic-y, but that powdery texture is almost heavenly sometimes. It almost feels like it's a note you can associate with the Almighty. You know, it has that kind of, just one of the most beautiful notes I've ever smelled in my entire journey is Russian Adam sent me an iris that had 80% irones, which most people, you know, brag about 15 to 20% irones. This had 80%. And one of the most beautiful materials I've ever smelled. So the iris in here is gorgeous, the oak moss, the vetiver, the cedar wood, and the amber in the base. Just a lovely old school feminine chypre that can be worn by, again, anyone, completely unisex. Amazon by Hermes at number 17. Number 16 is a fragrance that I need to get to know more. I've only had a chance to wear it to bed a couple times, but it's one that I can tell you for my taste is definitely a winner, and I just need to try to wear it more. It's another discontinued fragrance from the house of Etienne Aigner, and it's called Number 1. So Number 1 is officially discontinued, as is Number 2, believe it or not. And this is basically a spicy, leathery fragrance. So imagine it's taking some of the green galbanum bits for women that came out in the early 70s, that was really starting to get popular, and adding it for men. So you get this galbanum opening for men, and they've added clary sage. So you have this sweaty, clary sage adds this sweaty masculine bit to me, with sandalwood, patchouli, geranium, iris, vetiver, jasmine. But the kicker for me is the leather. And you get this leathery, spicy, there's a bit of tonka and vanilla, but just a touch, and ambergris and oak moss in the base. And these old, I'll tell you what, these are just absolute gems for vintage hunters, because very few people hype up stuff like this. And so I think I got my bottle for, I don't remember, definitely under $100. And so for under $100, this type of fragrance, you cannot find this. You cannot find this quality of perfume nowadays. You're going to pay over $100 for any designer that you buy at the counter nowadays. It used to be you could find designers for 30, 40, 50. Not anymore. Or if you do, you're going to have to go to discounters. To buy retail, you're over $100. And so you just can't find this type of perfumery for men anymore. It's very 70s in the sense that when you smell it, you'll know exactly what I mean. It almost feels like you're smelling like, you know, an old school boardroom, kind of in the same way that Wall Street feels like. It's kind of an old school boardroom. I imagine those big, gigantic car phones people had back in the day, but very little sweetness, almost no sweetness in this. It's just extreme spice, leather, patchouli, woods, oak moss, just a beautiful creation for men. My kind of fragrance for sure. So Aigner Number 1 comes in at number 16. Number 15 is actually one of the greatest chypres of all time. And it's a Edmund Rudnitska, one of the greatest perfumers of all time. It came out in 1972, and it's called Diorella. Now, Diorella sometimes gets a little bit of a bad rep. I think in Luca Turin's book, Tina Sanchez said that this can sometimes smell like a fish market, or her quote, don't quote me on it, but it was something like that. She said that the opening can have this fish market-like smell. And I think what she was getting at is that even in 1972, just to show how far ahead of the curve he was, in Diorella, you get this melony, aldehydic, citrusy note that became super popular in the 90s. It almost smells like cologne. Maybe it is cologne. I have no clue. But there is just a little bit of this melony freshness that really became associated with aquatics. But we're talking in the 90s. We're talking decades later. And you kind of smell a similar type opening in Le Parfum de Thérèse, which is Frederic Mall's, one of Frederic Mall's first fragrances that released with the brand in the year 2000. And, you know, it came out after Edmund Rudnitska actually passed away. His estate released it posthumously, if you will. And there are some similarities between the two, if you will. In my mind, there are some similarities between the two. This adds basil and honeysuckle. Speaking of honeysuckle, I know I mentioned the Creed earlier having this white floral honeysuckle note in zesty mandarin pamplemousse. If you're someone who made note of that because you're a huge fan of honeysuckle, check out Diorella. Diorella has a stunning honeysuckle note with rose, carnation, cyclamen, peach, oak moss, vetiver, patchouli, and musk. And again, we've talked about multiple amazing floral chypres between Cialenga, Givenchy III, Amazon, and now Diorella. This is kind of the floral chypre for women decade, if you will. They're just amazing. All of these are amazing. All of these I would easily wear, and there's more to come. So Diorella comes in at number 15. You know how hard it is to put a fragrance like Diorella at number 15? But I have to rank them by my favorites to wear. So next is a newer addition to my collection. Again, I've only had a chance to wear it to bed a couple times, but I can tell it's my kind of fragrance. This could even climb up the list. Ditto for Aigner number 1, by the way. But I'm really impressed with this one, and I wish this bottle was more readily available. This is a vintage bottle of Captain Molyneux. Captain Molyneux by Molyneux, and it came out in 1975. It's a kind of a woody fougere, if you will. So it's a spicy woody fougere. If you've smelled Paco Rabanne Pour Homme, which is very, very high on this list, you'll kind of get an idea, but there are obviously some changes in here. Captain Molyneux adds a clove note, okay? It adds a myrtle note, and the note listing is Indian sandalwood, which I don't know if that means Mysore or some different type of sandalwood, but you get thyme, you get vetiver, patchouli, and rosemary. And that rosemary combination with the thyme, with this, you know, provincial lavender fougere touch is really what reminds you of Paco Rabanne Pour Homme. But there are some additions here, like, for example, the clove. There's also Cistus labdanum here, which makes the dry down feel slightly more smoky. So whereas with Paco Rabanne Pour Homme, you get more of a clean, soapy feel with a little bit of that animalic honey. Here, you get more of this smoky take on a fougere. Imagine a early contender to something like Francesco Smalto Pour Homme, okay? Imagine that kind of smoky green fougere, but without the leather. Take the leather out, and you basically have Captain Molyneux. So very hard to find these vintage bottles, but if you can find one without, you know, getting bent over the coals, try Captain Molyneux. If you like the 70s style masculine, that's a good one for sure. But there are multiple versions of Captain Molyneux is the problem, so be careful. Try to get one of the older bottles, because I have no clue what the new versions are like. Okay, next on the list, we've got an Eau de Toilette, Eau de Parfum duo. You could go with either, or probably even the Pure Parfum, but I've never smelled the Pure Parfum. So at number 13, we've got a Jean Patou creation, and this is 1000. And this is such a stunning, you talk about fine French perfumery. This is the Eau de Parfum right here, and this is the Eau de Toilette. And the Eau de Toilette actually has the note listing on the background. And I don't know if you can see right there on the bottom. Can you see Mysore Sandalwood right there? So this has, look at this note listing. It's really stunning, actually. So you have osmanthus from China, Bulgarian rose, absolute of jasmine from grass, a harmony of viola odoranta, which I'm guessing is violet leaf, rose de mai, Mysore sandalwood, and Indonesian patchouli. And what a elegant, beautiful, again, marketed towards women. There's absolutely nothing that would stop a man from wearing this, and probably smelling like the most elegant guy in the entire place. You know, very few people are going to be wearing a vintage floral chypre created by the great Jean Carleo that has real Mysore sandalwood, real oak moss. That violet leaf for me is kind of the kicker. And I love osmanthus. Violet leaf and osmanthus give this slightly modern, but also slight masculine vibe that I think anyone can wear. Marketed towards women, it's a floral chypre. There's touches of greenness in here. There's fruity touches. It's just a beautiful creation. Very blessed to have those two bottles, thanks to Amouage. So that was number 13. They're going to share the 13th spot. Number 12, and this is the one that Yves Saint Laurent, the man, actually went butt-ass naked for to advertise this. If you've never seen the advertisement for YSL Pour Homme, it's iconic. Go do yourself a favor, check that out. And it's YSL Pour Homme. This is the only bottle of this that I have. Actually, I have a mini of the vintage. Let me show you what the vintage used to look like, just so you can see what the old bottle used to look like. So you can see right from the get-go there are differences. The original YSL Pour Homme. Okay, so the original YSL Pour Homme bottle looked like this. See how the YSL was running vertical up and down on the bottle? See how mine is kind of written on the bottom? Now, this is discontinued in all forms. So get whatever you can get. But if you have a chance to be a snob, this is what the first early version looks like. I don't know if there's differences. I'll do a comparison video one day. I know I give these citrus chypre, I know I give these citrus heavy. I don't know if this is a chypre or not. I think it's just kind of a citrusy, fresh fragrance. But I know I give these fragrances a tough time between, Eau Sauvage by Dior in the 60s, Chanel Pour Monsieur by Chanel from the 50s. And this is probably one of my more favorite takes on this style to wear because there's more going on. It's beginning to get more and more complex. The further along in time you get, the further they take this citrusy masculine style that was so popular. I mean, Dior Eau Sauvage, was kind of like the fragrance of a generation, if you will. And so they take this lemony lavender, there's Petitgrain, which is like the twigs and sticks of the tree. There's lemon vervain, there's bergamot, there is thyme, there's clary sage, there's rosemary, there's Brazilian rosewood, carnation, geranium, marjoram, patchouli, tonka bean, cedar, musk, sandalwood, vetiver, and amber. So you can see that it's a little bit more complex. I love the Brazilian rosewood in here. I love rosemary as a note in perfumery. I really don't like it in my food as much, which is strange, but I like it as a note in perfumery. And this just does, I think, just a much better job than Chanel's Pour Monsieur or, Dior Eau Sauvage or something like that. Yeah, it feels like there's depth underneath that citrusy aspect. It feels like there's depth, and that's really what I like about it. So one of these days I'll do a comparison video between the deep vintage of YSL Pour Homme and the bottle that I have, which I have to say is still very, very good. And YSL Pour Homme comes in at number 12. Number 11, and then we're going to get into the top 10. Number 11, and This was really hard for me to even put this here because obviously I'm putting it ahead of some all-time greats. And again, when you rank these lists, it's very hard to do. But on the other side of the coin, I'm thinking, my God, I'm only putting this at 11. Like, this is one of, I think, one of the best value for money fragrances you can buy. If you have 20 bucks in your pocket and you want to buy a fragrance, this is what I'd tell you to buy if you want to get started on what true masculine perfumery is. This is Original Denim. And this is actually a leather chypre, a proper leather chypre. It's spicy, it's woody, it's got this green basil with sage. There's a lot of spice and herbs. There's vermouth and bay leaf, and then there's cedar, patchouli, but it's about this peppery, oak mossy, leathery, spicy dry down with cardamom and cinnamon. It's such a beautiful, beautiful fragrance. You talk about a fragrance that punches above its weight class. I paid less than $20 for this, shipped. And it's one of the best, one of the best cheapies I think you can buy. I have no clue about versions. I also have no clue how they keep this current. Mine says Contour, made in Italy. Yeah, I don't really know anything about versions, to be honest with you. It says it's currently being marketed by Coda, C-O-D-A-A. I have no clue. All I know is that is an amazing masculine from 1975. And the fact that it's a leather fragrance, for that amount of money, you would have to pay a huge amount of money nowadays to get this type of perfumery done. This punches, just like I've said the same thing about Azure by the house of Estee Lauder. Estee Lauder's Azure, you would have to pay a huge amount of money to get that type of leather chypre done, and it's the same for Original Denim. So, on one hand, you might be shocked I put it at 11. On the other hand, it could easily have been higher. Number 10, the fragrance I was kind of going back and forth with, and again, you guys may be shocked, but it almost beat this out. But in the end, I had to put this one spot higher because I honestly think it's a much better fragrance. It's one of the better subjectively. I think not just subjectively, but objectively, I think this is a better fragrance. And I like wearing it just as much as denim, but I had to kind of give it the nod because of just the objective brilliance of this perfume. And this could easily be number one for anybody, and no one would bat an eye. This is Hermes 900 by Hermes. And this is a vintage bottle, but I hear the new bottles are still good. But I've never done a side-by-side comparison. So apparently Hermes 900 is Bernard Chant's take on Aromatics Elixir, which I've never smelled Aromatics Elixir. That's from 1971. That's a huge blind spot in this list. I completely understand. But this is my Aromatics Elixir, if you will, and one of my favorite masculine rose fragrances. It's rosewood, coriander, bergamot, lemon, rose, geranium, carnation, jasmine, orris root, lily of the valley, patchouli, oak moss, sandalwood, civet, and vetiver. And the civet in these old bottles, I don't know about the newer ones, but the civet here will punch. It is a thick, animalic civet, pissy. They did not hold back. This is 1973. This is an eau de cologne. It's actually referred to as an herbal cologne spray. Let me tell you something. This sometimes just kicks the shit out of modern eau de parfums. The longevity of this is out of this world. I can't believe this is an eau de cologne. Just lasts forever on my skin. It's thick. It's the rose is just otherworldly. One of the best masculine rose fragrances. Look at that red little line around the cap. Just giving you that quick flash of red. Oh, I love this stuff. Absolutely love it. And what's funny is I remember I bought this on eBay years ago. And I remember I kept watching it thinking, okay, the bidders are going to come in now. Like, you know how everyone jumps in at the end when the bidding process gets really closer to the end? I was like, okay, and I forgot what the original asking price was, like $125 or something, which is worth way more than that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have to bid against some people. No one even paid it attention. That's what I'm saying about some of these old vintage fragrances. If you go off the beaten path, you can find some of these that are just amazing fragrances that just aren't being hyped by the vintage, by the big shot vintage fragrance channels, and makes the price go to 500, 700, $1,000 a bottle. You can still find some of these amazing vintage fragrances for cheap if you kind of are prudent and look around, and you kind of just stay on top of it. Look periodically every other day or something, and you'll find some amazing deals. So this also just barely beat out Hermes 900. It was it gets really tough from here on out. But for number 9, we're going with Ho Hang by Balenciaga, which same perfumer as YSL Pour Homme, okay? Same perfumer, and these two share a similarity. What gives Ho Hang, to me, the edge up is the reason that I love Ho Hang so much is the way that they took that lemony, rosewood, cedar, patchouli combo thing, and you can see the similarity in the note breakdown. And they've added labdanum and benzoin, so it's heavier, it's thicker, and you can see the type of fragrances that I like. It takes that citrusy, lemony. There's a hit of mint in here apparently. Again, very similar to the way that the mint is used in Derby by Guerlain. Most people don't even know that there is a mint note in Derby. The vintage bottles of Derby have a peppermint note or something like that. Here it's a mint note, and I don't know if I would have been able to pick that mint out. Maybe the top notes deteriorated a little bit. This is an old tester that, Amouage found for me for very cheap. And it's a great reference. I'll do a full review on Ho Hang, but I love that, leathery, sticky labdanum in the base that's missing from YSL Pour Homme. So that is number 9. Number 8 is a Creed. Back to Creed. And again, you guys may be shocked that this is this high, but I absolutely love this stuff. And I'm sad that I'm already more than halfway through my bottle. This is Acier Aluminum. And Acier Aluminum is supposed to be a fragrance that Creed says is like wearing the, armor of a knight, or the chainmail of a knight, if you will. And this is how the old Creeds, again, used to come. Gray cap and eau de toilette. And this actually made the Ghost Perfumer's book. There was a little blurb on this, and they even mentioned the perfumer in the little blurb. And apparently they said he was some young up-and-coming perfumer that Olivier Creed, made a lowball offer to buy his perfume. And he had to, of course, sign a non-compete. He couldn't say who he was. So his career never really took off. Maybe if his name was out there, people would have known he made this. But, Creed, of course, has their own song and dance. And so this is discontinued. But this, to me, is like, my wife says it smells like potpourri. I think there's a little bit of spice in here that gives it a little bit of this potpourri-like vibe. Some people say there's a banana note in here. I promise there's no banana note in here at all. Maybe there's this mixture of clove and some sort of fruits, but not banana. But some sort of fruits and this ambergris and vanilla dry down. And if you know the way that Creed started to do vanilla in the 70s and into the 80s in some of their fragrances, this is really good quality vanilla. Guerlain is the king of vanilla to me. Nobody can touch Shalimar. Shalimar is, in my opinion, an absolute masterpiece. However, Creed has a fragrance called Venezia that came out in 1987 that has this sandalwood, ambergris, vanilla with rose and bergamot, heavy bergamot in the top, just like Shalimar. And the reason I bring that up is Creed has the ability to do a very well done vanilla that no one ever really talks about. I love it's almost like a masculine Shalimar. If Abbey Rouge is, Guerlain's take on a masculine Shalimar, this is Creed's take, and it's a completely different take. People say that this reminds them of like Porn Star Mustache. that it reminds them of, you know, it reminds them of the days when men were more men, if you will. You would see sweaty armpits, and you would see the old stash and the big sideburns, and you know, Dukes of Hazzard was on TV, and that's the image that kind of gets conjured up by acer aluminum. But I adore it. I love this stuff. You can see by the dent, and this is a 2015 bottle, and I wish I would have bought a flacon of this stuff, but I will cherish what I have. Just a fantastic fragrance. I absolutely adore it. And next on the list, we've got number 7. And number 7, again, very tough to rank these, but this is Jacques Bogart Signature. Now, the newer version of Jacques Bogart Signature comes in like a green bottle, but they're both amazing. Any version you can find of this. I have no clue how Jacques Bogart does it, but they do. Signature is, to me, I think it's the first Jacques Bogart for men. It's actually not called Signature. I'm sorry. Let me back up. It's called Bogart by the House of Jacques Bogart, but it actually looks like someone took a pen and wrote it, you know, and there's actually a pen on the box drawing the line underneath. So that's how it became known as Signature. But it came out in 1975. It's a green spicy fragrance that is technically a chypre. It's a green spicy chypre that is leathery, because there's a Russian leather note in here, believe it or not. But to my nose, it smells like a little bit like Paco Rabanne Pour Homme. And again, that has to do with the mixture of rosemary and lavender and oak moss. And there's tree moss in this. There's clove. Again, so there's clove added in this, just like Captain Molyneux, who also reminds me a little bit of Paco Rabanne Pour Homme, adds clove. Sorry, so these both have clove, but this is no leather. This is a big Russian leather note. So there's Russian leather, there's juniper for some freshness, there's nutmeg for spiciness, and then there's citruses in the top, and it's just a fantastic masculine, green, spicy. This is what the 70s were all about to me. And don't worry about the price. Don't think, oh, it's a $20 fragrance, so it's going to be shit. It's not. I promise you, it's absolutely not. Maurice Morin of Givaudan made this. And hell of a creation. What a start to the house of, for masculines, for the house of Jacques Bogart. Speaking of underrated fragrances, number 6 is a discontinued, and it's recently officially discontinued, sadly, unbelievably. This is Jeffrey Bean's Gray Flannel. So, Eugene did a video with Antoine Lee, and he asked him, what's one of the most, or one of the greatest fragrances that you could kind of shine a spotlight on that doesn't get recognized, or something along those lines. And Antoine Lee said, Gray Flannel. He said, I wore this as a man. I've seen the formula. It's one of the most complex formulas you'll ever imagine. And I know exactly what he means by that, because this literally feels like you're smelling, to me, I think of rolling hills. You know, you get the green galbanum, you get the neroli, which is expensive. You get the petitgrain, which is, again, the twigs and, you know, sticks, branches of the orange blossom tree, and bergamot, and violet, and narcissus, and geranium, mimosa, rose, iris. That's a huge floral heart for a masculine. And there is this floral, violety, you know, almost like the precursor to Fahrenheit, if you will. But I adore this stuff. There's sage, there's oak moss, there's cedar, there's vetiver, there's tonka, and kind of this, you know, again, when Thierry Vasser made that almondy base for the L'Homme Ideal line, right? So when Thierry Vasser made the almondy base that ended up making up the L'Homme Ideal Eau de Parfum line, it's fragrances like this that I think kind of paved the way. There's this almondy, tonka, oak moss. It almost hints tobacco without having tobacco. the nutty quality in the dry down with the woods, the vetiver, the cedar. Sometimes vetiver can come across as nutty on its own. And it's just I think it's a fantastic wear for, you know, spring, that kind of weather. No one talks about gray flannel. People make fun of it on the internet. I've seen, you know, when I see these young guys that do these videos on gray flannel and they're like, oh, it's just the most disgusting. I just have to kind of shake my head and laugh. They have no clue what they're talking about. Absolutely zero clue. Gray flannel on my list comes in at number 6. Number 5. Now, this is where you guys might come and really try to attack me because this should be number 1, but I can't put it number 1 because there are 4 other fragrances that I think I enjoy wearing more, and this is Chanel's number 19. Now, again, the greatest galbanum fragrance ever created? Yes, absolutely. The greatest galbanum fragrance ever created, objectively, 100,000%. I prefer the Eau de Toilette personally. This is a vintage. This is a vintage number 19 splash, and I personally prefer the Eau de Toilette because it's less floral. Okay. The Eau de Parfum focuses more on the hyacinth and neroli and iris and jasmine and narcissus and lily of the valley and rose and ylang ylang. And Chanel does those notes beautifully. But for me, this is a little bit more woody, a little more leathery, and less floral. You get more of the woody textured, but this is, again, these two, believe it or not, you know, again, you guys may laugh at this comparison, but these two both conjure up images in my head of kind of rolling hills, fresh sunshine, flowers growing in the prairie. They both get there in different ways. Obviously, gray flannel, you know, comparing gray flannel and number 19, some people might have just had an aneurysm. However, I'm not saying they're the same. I'm just saying that they conjure up images in my brain of kind of a similar space, similar time. And again, speaking of green chypres, you can see what was popular for women. There is this coldness to it, to this fragrance as well. Not as cold as some of the later green fragrances that Chanel put out. I think there's some very cold, you know, fragrances that came after number 19 that were green that Chanel did as well. But there is a coldness to this, almost an air of, what's the word that I'm looking for? Aristocracy, but maybe of a little bit of arrogance. You know what I mean? There's some arrogance to this. There's some old money to this. This is not new money. This is not flashy old new money. This is not the guy that goes out and buys the Ferrari because, you know, he's made it. This is the guy that could buy 10 Ferraris, but he drives the hoopty. You know what I mean? Or the gal. Or the gal. Obviously, this was marketed towards women, but I think it's completely unisex. This is the guy or the gal that has made it to the top of the food chain, but he doesn't have to elbow everybody in the side. He or she doesn't have to elbow everyone in the side to say, hey, remember I made it to the top. They're content with who they are. They know who they are. That's the feeling that this gives me. It's a very aloof feeling. You know, people say George Washington was aloof. And that's kind of the feeling it gives me. Someone who everyone knows is the leader. Everyone knows that they have conquered amazing things in their life, reached unbelievable heights no one thought possible, but yet they're not going to sit there and brag about it. They'll still help their fellow man. That's the feeling of number 19 to me. It's this kind of posh elegance, but slightly aristocratic, slightly aloof, and slightly cold, you know, slightly cold. Oh, it's so alluring, though. What a fantastic phrase. So hard to put this at number 5. So hard, but I had to. I had to because there's a new green fragrance that has captured my imagination. And I'm going to say, even at this moment in time, maybe because it's new, okay, has dethroned number 19 as my favorite feminine green fragrance. I know some people just fell out of their chairs, but this is the damnedest truth, 100% honest with you. This is a new addition to my collection. This is Estee Lauder's private collection. And this is the Pure Fragrance Spray version. Now, the Pure Fragrance Spray is long discontinued, apparently, from what I know. You can still get private collection, but you cannot get it in the Pure Fragrance Spray anymore. And I am in love, absolutely head over heels, in love with private collection. Oh. So there's no galbanum in this. There is a herbal coriander that kind of comes into play. And there's a honeysuckle note. And again, I mentioned honeysuckle earlier. One of the best honeysuckle notes I've ever smelled is in private collection. It's almost citrusy. You know, there's a touch of sweetness to the honeysuckle. Imagine imagine that you're just like naturally drawn to this honeysuckle, like the sweetness that's supposed to attract the bugs and the bees and, you know, all of that good stuff actually attracts you. That's how it feels to me. And the jasmine, I mean, jasmine's a note I usually struggle with, but here it's just so effortlessly beautiful. Ylang ylang, orange blossom, and then this simplistic sandalwood patchouli combination, which you're going to shrug your shoulders at. I'm telling you, I shrugged my shoulders at this. The only reason this is even in my collection is because I've heard people rave about this, and I ended up just taking the plunge blind. And what a blind buy it was. This creamy, you know, floral, woody, patchouli. The ingredients smell of the highest quality, honestly, of the highest quality. I don't think I've smelled ingredients like this except in the best fragrances. And you know what's funny is I had a similar reaction when I smelled Azure from Estee Lauder. Estee Lauder put out some amazing shit. They put out some bangers back in the day. Azure in the vintage formula, I think, is one of my favorite leather. I think I put it at the top of my leather chypres when I ranked them. And, you know, this likewise has captured me. It beat out number 19. Honestly, 100% honest. And, you know, you may think I'm losing my mind, but this is really something that captured me. It was created by Vincent Marcello. Oh, wow. I mean, for floral green perfumes marketed towards women, I really don't know if you can get better than that. It is so, so good. I'm in love with that. So that's number 4. Number 3, again, very tough, but I have to put this here. This is Pierre Cardin's Pour Monsieur. Now, Pour Monsieur is kind of the beginning. You could easily put this number 1 because of the reference that it had for other fragrances down the road. This is kind of the beginning of this amber fougere, if you will. It's spicy, it's leathery, it's got lavender, beautiful lavender, and it's the forefather, it's the grandfather of all of the fragrances that I always go crazy for. Think of things like YSL Jazz, Escada Pour Homme, Guerlain's Heritage. You know, think of those type of fragrances, those amber fougères, if you will, for lack of a better word. And they all started here. This was kind of the beginning of that DNA. It has all of my favorite notes. It has patchouli, it has leather, it has sandalwood, it has iris, it has oak moss, amber, benzoin, but that, just the way everything kind of comes together, there's almost this honeyed-like facet to the fragrance. Even though there's no honey, there's almost this honeyed-like facet. Almost like you can smell the honey patchouli that ended up being combined later on by some of the greats. So yes, I mean, Pierre Cardin's Pour Monsieur is, and I don't know I actually taped the sticker on there so it wouldn't come off. But that is what was on the bottle. And it's only a 1 fluid ounce bottle. I kind of cherish this stuff, even though it's a cheapie. This is the Eau de Toilette. Apparently there was an Eau de Cologne. I don't know the differences, but this came out in 1972, and what a creation. You know, there's some similarities to this and the next one that came out too, because both Pierre Cardin and number 2, which is Paco Rabanne Pour Homme, were part of this space age-like movement. Like, look at the bottles. And if you ever look at Paco Rabanne, his fashion show, when he would put on these fashion shows, he would have these women, you know, just almost like they were going to war, ironclad, you know, metal outfits, chains, just crazy stuff, right? And they were, both of these designers, Pierre Cardin and Paco Rabanne, were part of this, you know, modern, almost like a space age in fashion. I mean, some people say this looks like a rocket. Some people say it looks like something else. Some people say it looks like a microphone. But, you know, Paco Rabanne is number 2. Paco Rabanne Pour Homme is number 2. This is my father's signature scent for as long as I've been alive. This came out in 1973. And this is kind of the classic take on a masculine fougere. It's soapy. It smells like the most masculine high-end soap you could ever imagine. There's rosemary, clary sage, rosewood, lavender, geranium, tonka, bean, oak moss, musk, honey, amber. And that animalic honey comes out more in the vintage bottles. If you can get one with a raised R, that's exactly what you want. I wore this when Francesco Robanetta passed away. And let me tell you something, like, I've always loved this, but something clicked. Like, when he passed away and I wore this, I was like, holy shit. Like, you know, I've always smelled it on my old man because it was his signature scent, right? And I have a million memories with this. Everything you can think of. Parks, feeding ducks, you know, anything you can do with your old man. Going to the zoo together, you know, going to basketball games and all the stuff that we did. He is a great father. And I've always associated this. I used the word aloof earlier with number 19. I was always a little standoffish with Paco Rabanne Pour Homme because that was his fragrance. You know what I mean? When Francesco Robanetta died and I wore this in honor of him, it almost became mine. You know what I mean? Like, it clicked for me like it never has before. I've always enjoyed it. But when I wore it when he passed away, there was this you know, something just clicked where it feels now like more like mine than his. Obviously, it's his signature scent. I'll always associate it with him. But the beauty of this fragrance, what a fragrance this is. Oh, you know, barbershop-y, soapy fougere, clean, yet it has that animalic honey. There's this almost like this jelly, you know. The feel of the fragrance almost feels like you're smelling like a fruity jelly. Just amazing. Love it to pieces. Finally, number 1, and if you know my taste, there's no doubt this is number 1. I didn't bat an eye at putting this number 1 because it has to be number 1 because this is my taste through and through. You know, if this is my old man's scent, and even though I said how much I love it, and I do, you know, if this is my old man's scent, this is mine. Givenchy Gentleman from 1974. This is soapy, clean, and professional and barbershop-y, and with a slight bit of dirtiness underneath, that animalic honey underneath. This is the exact opposite. This is animalic, pissy, 80s honey in your face. Get out of my way or I'll push you out of the way. That's what this is. I'll go through you. I'm not going to go around you. I'm going to go through you. And it's 1974. Paul Leger created this. And if you can find the bottles that have the wraparound label, scoop them up while you can. I'm telling you, this made number 1 on my best patchouli list, and it is. It's my favorite patchouli. I have no clue what LVMH has done to this. now that they own Givenchy. No clue. All I know is, oh, if you like the animalic pissy honeys that came in the 80s, like if you like, for example, Hugo Boss #1, or you like Paco Rabanne's Tenere for men or something like that, this is almost a must. A must. A must sniff, if not a must own. I sent some to a friend of the channel, and she wrote back and said, this reminds me, you know, so many memories were sparked smelling some of these older fragrances, and this was one of them. It's slightly leathery. There is a leathery dry down to it, but it's the patchouli honey combination with orris root. And there's patchouli in multiple phases of the fragrance. You get patchouli almost all the way through. But you get this cinnamon, honey, rose, bergamot, lemon in the top, with patchouli, cedar, orris root, and jasmine in the heart. And then finally, you get patchouli, again, oak moss, leather, musk, vetiver, vanilla, and amber. And it's just this, I mean, look at the color of the juice. It almost looks like honeyed piss, right? And you could describe it that way. I mean, there is this, this in-your-face, animalic, pissy honey, you know, extremely masculine. I think there's probably even a little bit of castoreum in the base. I think there's castoreum in the base. I don't think they could have created such an animalic leather dry down without having that castoreum. So yes, that's my top 25 from 1970 to 1975. I know it's a long video. Thanks for sticking around and watching, everybody. Let me know what your favorites are from the early 70s. We'll do 76 to 79 very, very soon. And, you know, let me know what your favorites are from the list. Do like and subscribe and all the stuff I'm supposed to tell you as a YouTuber. Even though I don't feel like a YouTuber, that's what I'm supposed to say. It does help the algorithm. More importantly than the stupid algorithm, I want people who are like-minded. I want people who are like us, who have a true passion and a love for perfume to join my channel. That's what I want. I don't care if I have 1 subscriber or 1 million. I just want the most passionate lovers of fragrance to be here with us. But they have to find us. That's the thing. And the more videos I do, you know, and I'm going to do more individual reviews, even though they're not popular. You know, the early impressions and talking about an individual fragrance is extremely important because people search that. They find, you know, they find the channel that way. But yes, I think it does help the algorithm. And I love hearing from you guys. I love the back and forth and the interaction. I love how many comments the Alberto Morias video that I did yesterday got. So that kind of back and forth really, I really enjoy seeing. So thanks for watching, everybody. Very much appreciate it. Cheers. I hope to do a live stream soon. We can test out some new fragrances, but I just don't know when. But I'll try to give everyone as much a heads up as I can. So cheers, guys. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.